No,
just live out to them?
no,
Okay.
no. Hello, everyone. Hello, welcome back. Welcome back to another episode of Women Who Rock the World. Today, with me, I have Kelly Irene. A few words about Kelly. Kelly is an HR director, but she's also an astrologist and a coach and a speaker about the power of the charts, and also what she wants to do is basically breaking the stigma around astrology, and making sure that people know that it's not just one of those things in magazines, in women's magazines and stuff, but it's actually it can be truly used as a tool for professionals. So welcome, Irene. Welcome, Kelly.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Kiara.
You're welcome. So, I mean, your path from like HR director, to astrology, which is a word, that kind of scares a lot of
Mhm.
people, when it's like, oh, yeah, it's not science, it's not this, it's not that. There's a lot of stigma around it. But what
Yeah.
brought you here? What brought you to this path?
It's funny that you talk about that stigma because kind of in my past life, so as a young adult, I was very much in a religious setting where astrology was kind of seen as demonic, right? It's something that we don't touch. It's anti-religious, anti-Bible, our beliefs. And so even though it was something that had always kind of sparked my interest, I didn't do anything with it. Every once in a while, I might see a horoscope in a magazine and I'd read that and I'd be like, oh, that's so broad. It's not really that helpful. And that's kind of the other view that a lot of people have is it's filler for a woman's magazine, not, something that's useful for our daily lives. And for me, I was in that religious setting, and I created this beautiful life as I was coming into adulthood. I was married, I had two kids, we had a gorgeous house. My husband at the time was the pastor of the largest church in our 7,000 person town, tiny little town. Um, and I was a stay-at-home mom, and so I had what looked like from the outside this really beautiful life. But inside, it was not what it appeared to be. Inside, for myself, I was constantly battling against who I am because I couldn't live as that person in the life that I was building. I'm somebody who I love to bring opposing ideas together and see how we can bridge the gap between them. In a very fundamental religious setting, that can't happen. Things are either black or white. They're in or they're out. It's one or the other. You can't integrate opposing views. I'm somebody who loves to kind of look out for the outcast or the underdog, the misfits, the people who are on the edges of society. And again, in a religious setting, people are in or they're out, and those who are out need to stay out. And so I was fighting all of these natural impulses that I had in the life that I was building. And eventually that all crashed. I was divorced. I found myself as a single mom. I found myself without a community. Um, and I went into a spiritual hibernation. And it was only after about 2 years of that, of just, I was in survival mode. To begin with, my mom was helping me pay rent because I couldn't even pay my rent. Like I was broke, lonely, no friends, no community. And so I just dove headfirst into my career. I went from being a single mom to starting what ended up becoming a very successful HR career. But even in that, I found that I was never really content. It was like I was either in this really small setting where I worked for a company with 30 people. I loved them, they were amazing, but I wasn't challenged. Then I went to a company that was growing and we were backed by private equity. We were doing all kinds of acquisitions and mergers. So I had the challenge, but that was a wealth management firm that didn't line up with my values. And so I felt constantly out of alignment there. And then I went to another company that was really focused on tradition, and I'm not a traditional person. And so it was like everywhere I went, there was something that didn't feel right, and then something that did. And it was in the midst of all of that that I started to go, maybe there's something to astrology. I've always been curious about it. Maybe now is the time to look at that. And when I started to look into my own astrology, all these light bulbs went off where all these things that I thought were proof of something wrong with me were actually my superpowers. So when I talk about being able to bring opposing views together and kind of bridge the gap between them, that's my Libra rising. That's my filter, is I'm always asking the question of how can I bring these things together? And so being in HR, that's perfect for, personnel issues, right? You've got people who have very opposing views on what's happening. How do you bridge the gap? That whole thing about looking out for the misfits, the people who are left out of society. My son is in Aquarius. That's a very, Aquarians tend to be very rebellious, very kind of renegade spirit, tend to be activists. We're looking out for the good of everybody, not just a select few. So when I started to realize that about myself, it was like, oh, okay, this is actually, I've thought literally my entire life that there was something wrong with me, when this is my cosmic DNA. This is who I'm meant to be. And so getting that language, getting that way of viewing myself gave me a completely new view of the world, and eventually my career as well. But that was kind of the like journey to coming through that stigma with astrology, coming through the stigma of feeling like there was something wrong with me, to eventually being able to go superpowers.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. What's your relationship with religion today? Because you described some. I mean, 'cause,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
the first thing that comes to mind. Is like, has it changed at all?
It's changed a lot. I went through the period of being very in that setting when I was married to a pastor. When I got divorced, I did not expect to lose my community, and so that was very, very painful for me to lose that community because it was so unexpected. And so I went through a period of still trying to find a way to fit in the church, and eventually recognizing that it wasn't the place for me. And so there was a lot of grief there, because I had gone my whole life up until that point thinking that I would always be a leader in the church, that I would always be an active participant in the church. And so I had to go through a process of just recognizing there's not a, at that point, there's not a place for me there. And having to be okay with that, which was really, really hard. Today, I've, kind of come through the bitterness of that. And now I'm at the point of, okay, that was there for a season in my life, and it's not there now, and that's okay. A lot of that bitterness is gone. A lot of that kind of anger or holding against people for having had lost my community is gone. But that was a really long process. So now, church isn't really part of my life now. My kids still go to church. They still really enjoy it. They go with their dad. It's just not at this point. It's not for me. But my faith, I would say, one, it looks very different from what it did when I was in that setting, but it's expanded exponentially because of the work I've done with astrology and even in myself.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely makes sense.
Yeah.
So something, of course, the first thing that, and I completely agree with you, even though I'm slightly into astrology, I don't know much, like probably most people, like probably you before, before you
Yeah.
went into this path. But I'm fascinated by it, of course.
Hmm.
But and the what got my attention was that you integrate, astrology into the work setting, and also
Yeah.
what happened to you, like saying like I was living a great life, great for certain standards, of course, for what people think it's great, for what everyone thinks it's
Yeah.
great, but you were not fulfilling your true self. And
Mm-mm.
so, of course, I was very curious, saying like, what about myself? What if did I choose the right path for me? Like, because I'm happy about what I do, but like, so you got me super, super curious. And so I I asked you, and I know like a lot of people would be interested, not really, of course, about me, well, about me, probably the people that know me, have been following me for a while. But I think it's super interesting to show people like a little bit of what you do.
Yeah.
Let's say you're my HR, and I work in your company, and so you do my chart. What happens then?
Oh, this is my favorite thing. And it's funny because, we talk about astrology being taboo. I'm going to go back and then I promise I will answer your question. It is very much taboo in the workplace. When I tell people that I use astrology at work, they're like, what? How do you do that? Because, and the reason that I am so passionate about busting that taboo is it gives us the space and the grace to be ourselves and to allow others to do that as well. And that eliminates so much conflict. It eliminates so much stress. So many of us are working, like I was, out of alignment with our true self. And there's a lot of stress that's caused just by being misaligned in our work. So it's like when you really grasp who you are at your core, you go, okay, now I know where I'm out of alignment. Now I can look at how do I find alignment, whether that's in my current role, in a new role, or maybe in a completely new company, right? It doesn't necessarily mean you have to go get a new job if you find that you're out of alignment. It just means let's find a way to bring about a little bit more alignment.
Mhm.
So typically, if I'm using this at work, and I also do a lot of career coaching, so that's when I'm using it the most is when I do my coaching. We always start with, let's look at your chart, let's look at who you are, and then let's go from there. When I'm working with an employee who comes and they're, maybe unhappy with their job, unhappy with their manager, unhappy with something that's going on, we look at their chart and we look at three things to start with: your sun sign, your moon sign, and your rising sign. So our sun sign gets at how do we shine in the world? It talks about our personality. Most people know their sun sign. If I say, what's your sign? You're going to say Gemini. Your sun is in Gemini.
Yeah.
Um, and that's, it's a good kind of starting place because that's what lights you up is going to be a very Gemini energy. But then our moon sign gets at what do we need? What do we need to feel safe, satisfied? What do we need to feel our emotion, our intuition? When we're at work, what do we need to feel like successful? For me, that's going to be different than it is for somebody else. My moon is in Capricorn. I need to set big goals and I need to meet those goals. I can make a lot of money, I can help a lot of people, I can do detail stuff, but unless that all involves setting a big goal and achieving that goal, I'm not going to feel fully satisfied. That's just because, with my moon placement. So we want to make sure that the role that you're in is going to meet those needs. And then we look at your rising sign, where the eastern horizon was when you were born. And that gets at your filter. So when you go into a new situation, when you take on a new project, when you meet somebody new, you automatically have a series of questions that you're asking that you may not even be aware that you're asking. But they're going to be different from the person next to you. And if you are in a setting where those questions are not understood, where they're not valued, where they're not welcome, that's going to cause a lot of stress and misalignment and conflict as well. So that's why I start with those three, because that really helps us to go, okay, here are the three energies that we're looking at. Are you working in alignment with these three? There's all kinds of other places we can look. We can look at, for your career, but I always start with those because there's so much power in those three.
Yeah. And I mean, full disclosure for people listening, I gave my date of birth and place of birth and time of birth to Kelly beforehand. So that's why she
Yep.
knows I'm a Gemini, of course. And so that's why, because of course she needed to get herself prepared a little bit. I just wanted everyone to
Yeah.
know this.
Yeah. Thank you.
And so, yeah, what did you find about myself?
Yeah, so let's dive into your chart with those three things. So your sun is in Gemini, your moon is in Pisces, and your rising sign is Aries. So Gemini is the symbol for Gemini is the twins. It's a very playful energy, but it's also a very I need to know both sides of the story energy. I need to be able to ask questions. I need to be able to communicate. And you probably shine by communicating, right? It's no wonder that you're a podcast host or you're you do these lives because you shine when you're talking to people. That's part of your personality. You're going to be really good at asking okay, what's the other side of the story here? I have my sister's son is in Gemini and she's a family law attorney. And so she's really good at, hearing her client's side of the story. And in family law, you're always going to have two very opposite sides of the story. And so she can hear their story and then go, okay, let's also look at it from their perspective because we have to take that into account. And that's a superpower that she has. But that's a very Gemini superpower, I think. And then we pair that with your moon being in Pisces. Pisces is this very fluid, emotional, intuitive, dreamy, mystical energy. I think of it as, when you think about the Great Lakes in the United States and Canada, there's places if you're out on the lake, you feel like you're in the ocean because you can't see the shore. And that is a very Pisces energy, that there's not necessarily boundaries to things. You can be going and doing one thing and then going and doing another thing. And you don't necessarily need that structure that other people are going to need, because you really handle the fluidity of things. You need some fluidity to things. Like, my guess is if you're planning to go travel somewhere, you probably don't have an itinerary of where you're going to be all day, every day. And that
True.
probably would not feel good to you. Is that accurate?
It's very accurate. Yeah.
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 Because for you, you want to get there and just go with the flow, enjoy the experience. That's how you are going to feel satisfied, as if you can enjoy that and go with the flow on that. So you need to be in a role that's not rigid. If there's, if you're in a job where someone's saying you have to do this by 8 a.m., this by 9 p.m., and this by 10 p.m. every single day for the rest of the time that you're working with us, you are going to lose your mind. You're going
Yeah.
to
I,
hate it.
I was working for a company like 20 years ago, and after 2 years, I quit. It was
Hmm.
not for me because I had to be in the office like at this time every day.
Yeah.
If I was like 2 minutes late, I had to stay 15 more minutes in the evening,
Wow. Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and I was like, no, this cannot be the rest of my life.
Yeah, because and that got at that sense of, you have an internal need to go with the flow, to have fluidity. There's also that, I mentioned the mystical element of it, that you're never going to be satisfied with facts only. You're going to want feeling. You're going to want intuition to be part of your decision making process, your communication with people. And at work, where people tend to put intuition and emotion to the side, that can be really challenging. So if you're in a company that is, nope, we do facts only, you have to bring me the data, you have to have the Excel sheets. And there's so much benefit to that, but that's not your position. That's not something that's going to be ideal for you. You're going to need something where you can talk about, okay, I'm sensing into this, I'm feeling into this, to make your decisions.
Absolutely. It
Yeah.
does resonate. And it's something that not all people, but some people have a hard time with, and probably, of course, their chart is going to be different. It's
Yeah.
the fact that I base a lot of my decisions on intuition and saying, like, that
Yes.
person in that moment, the feeling that I had from that person was this, and that. And some people tell me, like, how can you base that out on a feeling? You cannot make decision based on a feeling. Like, no, I can't, because my
Yep.
heart tells me that it's a yes or a no, or I need to do this, I need
Yeah.
to do that. And I pay a lot of attention to like these kind of details for the majority of people, but to me
Yeah.
it's like natural. I have a feeling for people,
Yep.
and usually the first feeling is right, while later on, maybe I get a different feeling out of a person, but then the first feeling is always the right one.
And some of that is that Gemini, right? You can see both sides. And so
Mhm.
even if you start, you get that initial intuitive knowing about something, your brain is still going to be processing what other information is out there and trying to make sense of that. And so there's always going to be that play between, you have this, Gemini's an air sign, it's very thought based. Um, and Pisces is a water sign, so it's very emotional, intuitive. That's why I say that. You're always going to have that kind of water and air energy going. And then we'll bring fire into that in a minute too, with your Aries rising. Um, but it's, something that I talk with my clients about a lot, is the fact that our intuition is our sixth sense. Just like we can touch, we can smell, we can see, we can intuit. And that is just as valid for knowing and making decisions. And so the fact that you are comfortable enough with yourself to do that, you've probably had to practice that and probably had to give yourself permission to do that.
Oh
But
yeah,
it's great because that meets your
definitely.
needs.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
you said something. Yeah, we smell, the five senses, but there's intuition is is one of the senses
Yeah.
that of course is very much neglected. No one talks about it. It's not, the senses are five, that's what we're taught.
Yep.
But I
Yeah.
do believe that intuition is a part of us, and of course
Yes.
most people, not like, more people might think like, no, it's not, I want to follow it, but it's that we're not taught about it, we don't
Yep.
validate this sense.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's going to change. We're, if you follow any astrologers, or even I'm seeing this a lot more in magazines now, but we're entering into the age of Aquarius. And this is very much the age of technology, futuristic thinking, redefining what community means. These are kind of aspects of the age of Aquarius, but the other part of that is really understanding ourselves on an individual level. And so I think that as we move away from this, the age that we've been in prior to this, which was very rational, very leave feelings out of it, we're going to start to see emotion and intuition become much more acceptable as decision making powers. We're not 100% there, but I definitely, you're speaking to that. We're seeing that shift happening.
Yeah, absolutely, and
Yeah.
I'm glad.
Me
Uh,
too. Yeah.
I'm so glad,
Yeah.
because we don't allow ourselves to have enough of this, of intuition, of feelings, of
Yeah.
emotions. I do believe
Yeah.
that, it's um I was raised, but I'm sure like a lot of people my age, we were raised saying like, oh, don't cry, or don't.
Yes. Yeah.
But it depends, of course. If you cry all the time, well, maybe we need to investigate why we're crying all the time,
Mhm.
But it's something that we're taught as kids, like, don't cry, don't do this, like, that emotion is not valid. And then as
Yeah.
adults, we don't feel that we need to be sad. We're like always super happy, need to put a smile on our face.
Yep.
Or sometimes certain people are like, no, you're smiling all the time, no, it's not good. So it's like,
Yeah.
okay, where do I go?
Yeah.
This is an emotion that I have, so that's
Yeah.
valid, whether
Yeah.
it's crying or happy or angry. Like, we're not allowed to be angry. If but even myself, if I see someone in the street having like a burst of anger, the first emotion that I feel is like, I'm shocked. What happened?
Yeah.
Because we're not used to seeing that in public. And I'm not talking, of course, people just breaking stuff in the street, but just someone
Right.
angry. Or
Yeah.
um, something that happened to me last night. I was at a concert, and there were two guys and a girl, taking a picture and filming this woman that fell asleep on the couch at the concert. And they were making jokes, and they were making fun of her, just.
Mm.
And my first emotion was, okay, this is not right. I need to go there and say something. I need to stop them. But what happened is, and I've been thinking about it today, maybe I should have done something, but I didn't do anything, because we're not raised in a way, we need to look out for other people, but we're always
Yeah.
scared.
Yeah.
Just let it be, let it go. It doesn't
Yep.
involve you, so then let it be. But still, it's something that they were not beating her or not doing anything physically, but still, this person is probably going to find herself on all social media today, just falling asleep. I don't know if she was drunk. I don't know what happened, but
Yeah.
besides, it might be funny, you pass by, there was like a loud concert and someone is sleeping. Yes, ah ha ha, it's funny, but it's one thing to see that and say, okay, it's funny, and it's another thing to make fun of it with your
Yeah.
friends and then probably post it on social media. So stuff like this, I feel that we need to definitely become better humans, on stuff like this, and speak
Yeah.
out. I'm
Yeah.
saying this, and again, I didn't do anything last night, and
Mm.
I today I was like, why I should have, but now it's too late. There's nothing I can do, but it probably is gonna
Yeah.
useful for next time.
Yep.
Hey, don't be afraid. It's like, has nothing to do, like, mind your own business. It's my business if it bothers me and I feel it doesn't respect a person that cannot defend
Yeah.
herself in this
Yeah.
case.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's that, looking out for the person who's not on the inside of whatever's happening, right? They had their little group going on, and obviously she was the outside of that. And yeah, that's one of those where I'm like, I could totally see how you would do that and not say anything or not do anything. I think any of us in that position would have been 50-50 either way with it. But there's that need to go, okay, just because they're doing something different doesn't mean it's worthy of you mocking. Doesn't mean
Hmm.
that you should be, making fun of, posting on social, using this to your advantage.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. I went a little bit of off the rails with this,
Okay.
but and so you mentioned about like Aries rising
Yes.
in the
So you've
chart.
got your Aries rising. Our rising sign, again, is our filter. It's our lens that we see the world through. It's the questions that we're asking. It's our values. It's our motivators. So for you having Aries rising, Aries is a fire sign. It's that like spark that gets a fire going. So you think of if you have a large dry, and I live in California, we get a lot of wildfires here, and a lot of times they literally start because of a spark. But that's that Aries fire is it's a spark that can ignite a huge flame. Um, it's the beginning of the zodiac sign, so it's an initiator, it's an action taking energy. And so when I look at that as somebody's rising sign, my first thought is you have to be in a position that allows you to take action, that allows you to initiate things, because you're not somebody who is going to be, if if you have to go through a lot of red tape, if you have to complete, forms and have 20 meetings, and it takes a month to get a new project started when you could get it going right this minute because that's how you are. That's where you would need to again consider your career and say, okay, if I'm in that position, I think university settings are like this a lot, or even government settings are like this, where there's a lot of layers that you have to go through before something can get started. And that's
Bureaucracy.
fine. That works for some people. For somebody who is an action taker with an Aries rising or an Aries sun or an Aries moon, that's not going to be so great because you're constantly going to be butting up against what, is required of you in that job. And so that's where, when I talk about the space and the grace to be ourselves, this is what I mean by it is if we are in a position where we're constantly butting up against the way that our company does things, then we get to decide, okay, do I want to do it like that company does it? And am I willing to find a way to be aligned with that? Or am I going to go, nope, I want to do this a different way. I want to, um, you know, do it my way, which means I might not be able to stay with the company, kind of a thing. So those are decisions that people have to make, but it's when you know that energy about yourself that's just it's who you are, not something wrong with you, right? Because you could feel like, wow, I'm just impatient, I'm too bossy, I need to slow my roll, I need to, whatever you might say as the flip side of this. When you go, no, that's my cosmic DNA, that's how I was born, then you can start to give yourself that space and that grace to be that person.
Absolutely. It does make
Yeah.
sense. Yeah. And when it makes sense, it's something exactly what you said, like considering some of our weaknesses, or our traits as
Hmm.
weaknesses. And
Yeah.
while in fact, we can see things both ways, talking about the Gemini,
Yeah. Yeah.
Gemini, things both ways. It could be a total weakness, but it can also
Yep.
be our strength for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, and that's that, going back to the story you just told, a lot of times when in our society, when we see something different from us, the first thought is usually there's something wrong with that.
Mm.
That's why we can justify making fun of somebody. That's why we can justify hurting other people because there's something wrong with that. But we a lot of times turn that internally. When we look different from the people around us, when we act different, when we process differently from the people that we're working with or the company that we're working with, our first thought is there's something wrong with me. And that's where this is so helpful to go, okay, there's nothing wrong with me. This is who I am. And to give yourself that permission to be that person.
It takes time, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm talking to all the people out there going through a path, on a
Yeah.
journey of self-discovery and empowerment. It does take a lot.
Yeah. It
And
does. And it's
oh,
not an
sorry.
overnight thing. No, go
Yeah,
ahead.
it's an overnight thing, and it's probably just up and downs.
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot of learning, it's a lot of unlearning and relearning. It's trial and error too to say, okay, if someone has just discovered my rising sign is Aries, my first question is probably, what can I do with this information in this situation, with this project, with this person? What action can I take? Um, they might have to sit with that for a little bit before they even recognize it in their life. Because either it's so natural that they don't even realize that's what they're doing, or they've pushed that down and ignored that for so long that they've taught themselves not to do that.
That's interesting. It definitely can happen as well, right? Because
Yeah,
whether it's written in our cosmic DNA or not, where we've been taught or we learn to behave and do things a certain way that we almost are
yeah,
like, yeah, okay, this kind of resonates, but what do I do? And
yeah.
when that happens with your clients, what do you usually, I mean, probably there's not a usually because it depends on
Hmm.
the person, but um, are probably your first advice would be to sit with this information for a minute,
Hmm.
and then what do you do with your clients to help them?
Yeah. Obviously it does depend on the person, but a lot of times, one thing that I'm really good at is asking questions that help people see themselves. And so typically, if I'm working with a client and we're looking at this chart, we'll be talking about questions that come up to say, like, where do you see this? Where do you not? How does this feel when you think about your current job or your current manager? Or, before I even work with somebody, we do this really cool, and it's something that I do for free all the time. It's a career assessment or an alignment assessment. And we're essentially going through like 5 key areas to see, where do you feel in alignment? Where do you not? And so we have that information, we have the chart, and then we work those together. Okay, if you told me that you hate going to work every day, you've lost your sense of purpose, you feel like you're constantly arguing with your manager, the moment they walk in the door, you shut down. Let's talk about where this might be stemming from in your chart. If this is your energy, that Aries energy, how do you think that that's playing into the reason that you shut down every time your manager walks through the door or calls you on Zoom, or whatever it is that they've told me? So it's a lot of conversation. It's a lot of, I kind of see myself as a light bearer where I've walked this journey, and so I can hold up my light to help somebody see what's the next step on their journey. And it's interesting because I usually work through this really amazing process. It's so fun to watch people go through it, but it's this awareness of self, awareness of what I look like in my position now, where I'm out of alignment. And then we get to the really fun part, which is, what are we going to do about it? And that's where a lot of the actual career coaching comes in. But it's not until we've done at least a few weeks of, let's do this assessment, let's do this deep dive into who you are and why you feel out of alignment, before we can figure out what we're going to do about that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, this is really, I mean, I'm super, it's beyond fascinated,
Mm.
about all of this. And I know a lot of people, a lot of women out there that follow this podcast are, it's because, again, we all are on some level passionate about astrology, but
Yeah.
we're scared, that
Yeah.
it's like, it's a lot of blah, 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 but then there's no proof that this, but in reality, when we go deeper, it definitely, because again, it's not something that you said before. Sorry, it looks like I'm changing
Yeah.
subject. No, something that you said
No, you're fine.
before was that a lot of people know their sun sign, like
Yeah.
myself, Gemini, etc. But when I read something in a magazine about Gemini, yeah, I can recognize some traits, but especially like the weekly,
Yeah.
horoscopy and etc. You're like, okay, but how is that possible that's going to happen to all
Hmm.
the Gemini out there in the world?
Yeah.
Well, in reality, it's not just about that, but it's, for instance, for myself, Gemini, and then with the moon in pieces, and then the rising in Aries, that's a different story, And
Yeah.
so I think probably there should be more depth into this subject for sure, even in
Yeah.
magazines, because that's the first means of communication
Hmm.
that people have, and the first taste that they have of astrology. At
Yeah.
least that's what I would think. That's what I had, for myself,
Yeah.
magazines. But I'm sure, like, probably 90% of people
Yes.
um, out there. So, well, thanks a lot for helping me and helping us all understand that astrology, again, it's not just for magazines, women's magazines and stuff like that, but it's actually it's like science. Like, you call it cosmic DNA, which totally,
Mhm.
I think it's the perfect word. Um, yeah, thanks again. I'm really fascinated. Everyone, if you guys want to reach out to Kelly, I'm going to put her links later on today on our chat. Of course, this chat is going to stay on YouTube. It's going to be on Spotify later on as well. So you guys are free to rewatch it or watch it as many times as you like. And in the meantime, Kelly,
Thank you.
thanks so much.
Oh, thank you. I love talking about this. So thanks for giving me the space to
Yeah,
talk
I
about
can
it.
totally, I can totally tell because your eyes like just sparkle. You talk about the
Oh,
sparkle
thanks.
before, so it definitely, your eyes just say it all about how passionate
Mm,
you are and about this, and that's, again, you're fulfilling your purpose,
yeah.
and following your cosmic DNA for sure.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks again, Kelly.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for watching. Bye.